As I stepped into the restaurant, I immediately got the sense I was running behind. It sure looked that way. Everybody was already settled in, glasses chiming together, laughter drifting over the crisp white tablecloths, and the soft candlelight making everything feel a little too perfect, almost like the party had kicked off before I even arrived. But it wasn't just that dinner was already being served, or that my sister was right in the middle of giving a toast. What really hit me was that there wasn't a seat for me at all. I found myself standing awkwardly at the end of the table, still wearing my coat, clutching a small gift bag I'd picked up for my mom. Yeah, my mom, even though it was supposed to be my birthday. The only empty chair was taken up by her purse. I just stared at it. The rest of the family barely glanced my way. One cousin gave a little smirk, my uncle kept his eyes on the table, and my mom took a sip of wine before saying, cool as ever, "The floor suits you, doesn't it?" That's when the whole table broke out in this weird, forced laughter, like they didn't know what else to do. My heart didn't exactly sink. It just sort of floated away. I could hear what they were saying, feel my face getting hot, but what stuck with me most was the sound of forks scraping plates, a bottle being opened, and my sister snapping a photo like nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I stood there for what felt like forever, maybe 10, maybe 20 seconds. Nobody got up. Nobody offered me a seat. Nobody said, "Hey, that's not right." So I set the gift bag down on the corner of the table, slow and steady, and kept my mouth shut. Then I turned around and walked out. The last thing I heard was my mom's voice, all dramatic. Once I was outside, the city noise hit me like a tidal wave, cars honking, people laughing, but this time none of it was aimed at me. I walked about 3 blocks before I realized I was still carrying my coat in one hand. I didn't cry. I stopped at a crosswalk and caught my reflection in a shop window, makeup done a little too carefully, hair curled for the first time in weeks. That's the thing about people who get overlooked. We go overboard, hoping maybe this time someone will notice, maybe they'll make room for us. But there was no seat for me. It wasn't an accident, it was intentional. And I got the message, loud and clear, served up with a glass of wine and a smirk. That night I didn't go back home. Instead, I used my emergency savings to book a hotel room, sat on a bed with perfectly tucked sheets, and watched the city lights from above. That's when I made up my mind. No yelling, no plotting revenge, just a new boundary. I shut off my phone, ordered some room service, and decided to rewrite the story of my night because I knew something they didn't. I wasn't just some girl left standing without a chair. I was a woman who'd been quietly building something, and come morning they'd finally see. My name's Rachel Carter, and wherever you're watching this from, I hope you'll stick around. Because when they told me the floor was where I belonged, they had no idea I'd already built my own stage. That scene in the restaurant wasn't random, it was just the most public moment in a story I've been living for years. I was always the extra, the helper, the one behind the camera while my sister posed in a dress I could never afford, a gift from the same mom who once told me, "We can't spoil both of you." Vanessa, my sister who's 2 years older, was always the favorite, the golden child. She got praised for doing the bare minimum while I got in trouble for showing any feelings. If Vanessa brought home a B, it was called resilience. If I got an A-, I got a lecture about not trying hard enough. She could cry at dinner and be called sensitive. If I spoke up, I was labeled difficult. My mom used to say, "You're strong, Janelle. You don't need all that attention." What she really meant was, "You don't deserve it." It didn't start with birthdays, but birthdays were always the hardest. When Vanessa turned 16, she got a big tent party in the backyard, catered food and live music. When I hit 16, I got to share a cake at her graduation party. Her friends sang louder than mine. I kept telling myself I was just imagining things, that I should be grateful to be included at all, that if I just worked harder, showed up, and stayed quiet, maybe I'd finally earn their love. Spoiler alert, I never did. I helped them out when they needed money, paid the rent when my mom fell behind, fixed up Vanessa's resume, drove her to job interviews, even co-signed her apartment lease when she couldn't get it on her own. And every time I told myself, this is it. This is the time they'll finally say thank you, finally see me, finally let me sit at the center of the table instead of off to the side. But last night made it clear what I should have realized a long time ago. They didn't forget to save me a seat. They decided not to. It was all a joke to them. The floor suits you. My mom said it with a smirk, sipping her wine like she'd been waiting her whole life to say those words. Maybe she had. Maybe I was never the daughter she wanted, just the one she put up with. The one who stayed in the background and didn't talk back. Well, not anymore. Leaving that restaurant didn't feel like I was falling apart. It felt like I was finally free, like I'd stopped begging for attention from people who never cared to notice me in the first place. What they didn't realize, what none of them ever bothered to ask about, even when I dropped hints, was that I'd been working on something big, something honest, something they'd never want out in the open. And that project was about to go live in less than a day. I figured someone might reach out, not right away, I wasn't that naive, but maybe later that night. Maybe a text, a snarky voicemail, some half-hearted attempt to smooth things over. But nothing came. I checked my phone around midnight, still nothing. The only notifications were from work, a happy birthday from an old roommate, and a coupon for a free coffee. That silence hit harder than any insult. I stared at my phone, its screen glowing in the dim hotel room, and it hit me they hadn't just forgotten about me. They didn't even miss me. I could have disappeared into the city and their night would have rolled on, champagne, inside jokes, laughter I was never part of. And honestly, why would they call? I'd always played my role too well. I was the one who showed up when nobody else did, bought the birthday cakes when mom forgot, cleaned up after family dinners, listened to Vanessa's heartbreaks only to be called judgmental when I tried to be honest. They never noticed me leaving because they never really noticed I was there at all. So I stopped waiting for them. At 1 in the morning, I powered off my phone and opened my laptop. I pulled up the press preview I'd been saving for weeks, a media embargo set to lift at exactly 9 a.m. the next day. The title of the series was What We Carry, Stories from the Family Table, a 6-part documentary I co-produced, hosted, and wrote. It wasn't exactly about my family, but it was close enough to sting. Each episode told a story about emotional labor. The invisible kid, the daughter nobody celebrated, the caretaker treated like a backup plan. We used actors, changed names, but the truth underneath it all was mine. The last episode was the hardest. I recorded the voiceover with a lump in my throat. Some daughters are taught to be quiet, some to be responsible, and some to just fade away. At 9 a.m. the embargo would lift, the whole series would stream, and my name, Rachel Carter, would be right there in the credits as creator and narrator. I didn't make it to get back at anyone. I made it to survive, to finally tell the story I was never allowed to share at our table, to give the girl on the floor a voice, the one they said, "The floor suits you," to. She was about to be seen in living rooms all over the country, and maybe, just maybe, the people who laughed while I stood there empty-handed would finally understand what it feels like to be left out, to hear what real silence sounds like. This documentary wasn't just a side project. It was everything I'd poured myself into for almost 2 years, late nights after my day job. Weekends spent interviewing women with stories like mine, writing voiceovers with shaky hands, editing footage on a busted laptop because all my money went to rent, and helping the same people who forgot my birthday more than once. At first I pitched it under a fake name. I didn't want it to be about me. But the producers, real ones from a decent streaming network, said my narration was what made it real, gave it heart, gave it fire without anger. They offered me a contract, then a writing credit, and finally my full name in the credits. I hesitated because even after a lifetime of being invisible, part of me still hoped they'd see me if I just waited long enough. But that hope died the second my mom said, "The floor suits you." So I signed. The morning after I walked out, I sat on the edge of my hotel bed and watched the premiere notification pop up. Episode 1 was already trending. The opening line on the title card read, "Some daughters grow up loved, others grow up useful." I watched the first 5 minutes with the volume turned down low. A reenactment of a family dinner, a daughter washing dishes while everyone else laughed in the next room, a mother saying, "You're too much, did you know that?" I didn't need to see more. I'd lived it. I checked social media, hundreds of shares, a comment thread growing by the minute, women tagging each other. "This is us, I feel so seen, did you cry during episode 3? I cried during episode 3. Then I saw it, a Metro News 5 had picked up the story, streaming spotlight. What We Carry explores unspoken family wounds. They used a still of me recording voiceover, headphones on, soft light, looking focused. It was a good shot. I looked strong, not angry, not bitter, just steady. I closed my laptop and let out a long breath. I wasn't going to send it to my family, I didn't need to. They'd find it on their own, and when they did, they'd see their daughter front and center, voice steady, not shouting but letting the truth echo, because the camera had been rolling long before they told me the floor was where I belonged. Now the whole world was watching. They didn't call when it aired. They didn't text when it started trending. But I knew the exact moment they found out. It was about 10:42 a.m., because at 10:43 my phone lit up with a text from my sister. "WTF did you do?" No hello, no punctuation, no denial, just panic. At 10:47 another message, you seriously made a whole show about us. I didn't answer. I was sitting in a coffee shop down the street from the hotel, hoodie up, sunglasses on, watching people scroll through their phones and lean in to whisper about the documentary that had just dropped. I overheard one woman say, "It's like she's telling my story." She had no idea I was sitting just a few tables away. At 10:15 that morning, my phone started buzzing with my mom's name on the screen. I let it ring out. She left a voicemail, her words tumbling out, breathless, like she'd just run a race to get to the phone. "Janelle, I don't even know what to say. We all watched it. Why would you do something like this? Why didn't you just come talk to us?" The last time I tried to talk, I was standing at the edge of a table in a fancy restaurant on my own birthday holding a present for her, and she told me the floor was where I belonged. There was nothing left to say. What she really meant was, "Why didn't you just keep your mouth shut?" A little after noon, my uncle sent me a screenshot, my name big and bright in the opening credits, frozen on his TV. "Is this really you?" That's all he wrote. I didn't bother to answer. By 2 o'clock my mom had left 3 more voicemails. The last one didn't sound angry anymore. She sounded small, almost lost. "You embarrassed us, Janelle. People at community center are starting to talk. Your aunt's been crying all morning. I just don't get what you wanted out of this." What did I want? Honestly, not much. I just wanted to feel like I mattered. I wanted 1 year where I didn't have to fight to be seen. Just one birthday where I wasn't treated like an afterthought, told to sit on the floor like I was in the way. So I gave myself the spotlight they never would, and the world actually listened. By the time the sun went down, my documentary had climbed to number 3 on the streaming charts. Suddenly, my inbox was filling up with requests, podcasts, indie writers, even a morning show wanted to talk to me. Not because I was some big deal, but because my story was their story too. So many women had lived through their own version of that dinner, that laughter, those little stings that come wrapped in family smiles. Now they finally had a name for it, a voice, and it was mine. But my mom didn't see it that way. That night she sent one last message, a long one. I read it twice just to be sure. She said I'd shamed the family, twisted the facts, made everyone look like villains over one bad night. But near the end she wrote something that made me stop. "You always needed more attention than the rest of us. I guess this was your way of finally getting it." That line, that was the whole story. She still didn't get it. Not after all these years, not after a lifetime of being invisible unless they needed something, not even after the world saw me first. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I didn't argue, didn't try to explain, didn't slip back into the role of the good daughter who could be guilted into silence. I blocked her number and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone to understand me. I was just done. I used to think that not responding meant I'd lost, that if I didn't defend myself I was running away, that if I didn't explain I was letting them win, that silence was weakness, a sign of a small life hiding behind a locked door. But now I know something they never taught me. Silence is an answer, and for me it was the only answer they were ever going to get. After I blocked their numbers, I didn't make a big show of it. No dramatic social media post, no cryptic quote, no selfie with a caption about boundaries. I just slipped out of their story and for the first time started writing my own. I extended my hotel stay, gave myself a whole week, 7 days with no obligations, no texts, no expectations. Just me, my breath, my thoughts, and the city humming outside a window that didn't remind me of anything I'd lost. On my second night, I ordered takeout and watched the 3rd episode of my own documentary as if I were just another viewer, because in a way I was. That version of me, the girl who stood in the kitchen at 17, trying to explain why Vanessa's words hurt, only to be told, "Don't be so sensitive," she wrote it. The girl who hid in her bedroom while her birthday cake sat untouched in the living room because Vanessa was having a bad day. She finally had a microphone and I didn't need to add a thing. The world heard her. By the middle of the week, my inbox was overflowing with messages from strangers. Women in their 30s, mothers in their 50s, even a teenager who said she showed her dad episode 2 and he cried, really cried for the first time in her life. One message stuck with me. I thought I was crazy for how much it hurt to be the one no one saw. You put words to something I've been carrying for years. Thank you for not sugarcoating it. Thank you for letting it be ugly and real. That one made me cry, not a meltdown, just quiet tears, a kind of gratitude and release. Because the biggest lie I'd ever believed was that my pain didn't count unless someone else admitted it, that if they didn't acknowledge it, it wasn't real. But that's not how pain works. Sometimes pain is the room you're not invited into, the birthday toast that skips your name, the empty chair at a restaurant where you're supposed to be the guest of honor. That pain doesn't need a witness to exist. And healing isn't always loud. It's not always fire and revenge. Sometimes healing is eating a meal slowly, not waiting for someone to interrupt. Sometimes it's sitting in silence and not mistaking the quiet for punishment. Sometimes it's seeing your sister's name trending next to yours and not caring at all. Vanessa tried to respond, by the way. She posted some vague story about family drama and how some people will do anything for attention. I didn't watch it. A friend sent me a screenshot. I deleted it, not out of anger but out of freedom. Because I was done performing forgiveness, done earning affection, done fighting for a seat at a table that was always going to be too small for me on purpose. By the end of the week I'd found an apartment listing, small, private, filled with morning light. I signed the lease because I didn't just want distance, I wanted space. Space to breathe, to write, to live without waiting to be chosen. And when the leasing agent handed me the keys, she asked, "Do you need help carrying anything?" I smiled and said, "No, I'm good. I've been carrying everything on my own for years. I've got it." I decided to give myself a birthday that actually meant something. Not the night at that restaurant, that wasn't a birthday, that was just the last chapter in a story I'd been trying to close for years. This time I wanted something real, something that felt like it belonged to me. There was nothing fancy about it, no RSVP list, no place cards, no folded napkins or waiters in black aprons. I rented a long wooden table in a green leaf gardens I found online, set out 6 chairs, and invited 3 friends who had shown up for me when it counted. The lights were simple, just a string of bulbs overhead, glowing soft and golden, like little moons that didn't want to leave. I put on a burnt orange dress I'd picked up for the occasion, nothing designer, but it hugged me just right and made me feel like I was finally stepping into my own skin. My friends brought food they'd cooked themselves. One came with a bundle of wildflowers, another with candles, and the third just brought her laughter and her open heart. That was more than I'd ever gotten from family on any birthday. We didn't make a big deal out of speeches or toasts. Nobody tried to sum up the hard years or talk about leaving old pain behind. We just ate, passed plates around, and let the conversation drift wherever it wanted. At one point someone asked, "Is this your first real birthday?" I had to stop and think. I remembered being 10, watching Vanessa throw a fit because her cake didn't have as many sprinkles as mine. I remembered turning 21 and realizing my mom had invited her friends instead of mine. I remembered last year sitting alone because nobody remembered to send out the invite. Then I looked around at these friends, people who saw me, not just what I could do for them, people who never asked me to shrink so they could feel bigger. I smiled and said, "Yeah, this is the first one that feels like it's actually mine." Nobody clapped or made a fuss. They just smiled back, and in that moment I felt understood in a way I never had before. After dinner, I walked home with a box of leftover cake wrapped in foil and a bottle of sparkling cider tucked under my arm. I didn't feel sad, I didn't replay old conversations in my head, and I didn't let my mother's words echo in my mind. What mattered was the quiet happiness I carried with me, the crumbs on my plate and the candle I blew out, not to wish for something different, but to finally let go of what I'd been holding onto for too long. When I got back to my apartment, I slipped off my shoes and sat down on the floor. Not because there wasn't a seat for me, but because this time the floor was mine. I'd brought myself here, no apologies, no pretending. Just a woman who finally gave herself a birthday and made it count. A year later, I found myself sitting on a stage facing 3 other women, a journalist, a therapist, and a social worker. We were part of a televised panel about emotional labor and what it means to walk away from family that never really saw you. The irony wasn't lost on me. 12 months before, I'd been humiliated in a restaurant, told by my own mother that the floor was where I belonged. Now I was in a velvet chair under Channel 7 Studios lights, introduced as the creator of What We Carry, a documentary that had gone viral, and as someone who spoke up for all the daughters who'd been made invisible. I didn't force a smile or try to hold back tears. I just sat there steady and calm, like I'd been practicing for this seat my whole life. Because in a way I had. When the host asked me what family meant to me now, I said, "Family isn't about who shares your last name. It's about who saves you a seat, even if you're late, even if you're not perfect, even if you show up with the truth instead of a mask." Someone in the audience dabbed at their eyes. Someone else clapped, soft and slow. It wasn't a big dramatic moment, and it didn't need to be. I wasn't there to perform. I was just there to tell the truth. After the cameras stopped rolling, I wandered out into the hallway while the crew packed up. I walked past rows of empty chairs, stopped at one and rested my hand on the back. I smiled not because I missed anything but because I remembered. I remembered being 17 sitting on my bedroom floor while my sister blew out candles downstairs. I remembered being 25, cleaning up after my own birthday while everyone else laughed in the next room. I remembered standing in that restaurant holding a gift bag and realizing they never planned to make space for me. So I made space for myself. I brought my own chair, and when they wouldn't let me sit at their table, I built my own. That night, I walked home to my new apartment, a little bigger, with more sunlight and a shelf full of stories I'd finally started writing. There were no missed calls from my mother, no texts from Vanessa. Not because we'd made peace, but because I'd stopped waiting for them to be part of my life. I ordered takeout, lit a candle, and ate at my kitchen table with music playing low in the background. Before bed, I pulled out a single sheet of paper and wrote a letter to myself, not to send, not to post, just to keep for the days when I needed reminding. It said, "They told you the floor was where you belonged, but you knew better. You turned the floor into your foundation. You built your own stage. You brought your own chair and you sat in it, fully, finally, without fear." That letter is taped to my fridge now, right next to a photo from my last birthday, the real one with the backyard table, the string lights, and nobody laughing at my expense. Just joy. Just belonging. Just peace, quiet, earned, and all mine.